Greetings and welcome to the second sign. Today we're looking at the 7th instalment in our Stanley Plotkins legal deposition watch along, where he is called as an expert witness in the case of some parents who are disputing whether or not their child should be treated with vaccines. Stanley offers himself, or is asked to come on and testify that there's no harm, there's no risk for a child to take it, and he's questioned intensively by the co-counsellors, Aaron Siri and let's find the other lady's name, and Amy Ruby, who put together the case for the plaintiff, basically, and that is the mother who doesn't want the child treated, whereas the father does, so they use Laura Nua. Greetings, by the way, to Rosie in the live chat. Seems to suggest that the stream's frozen. Hopefully that isn't the case. Seems to be working alright on my monitor, but if it's any different, yeah, let me know, please. If it's working, hopefully it is. You can, of course, watch it over on Rumble. Right, we'll get those things out of the way. If this is the first of these Stanley Plotkins watch-alongs, then the Yahuwah is in the live chat over on Rumble. Great to have you with us. If you want to see where you can watch the rest, basically catch up with the rest of this case, then let me take that text down. You can go to the description. Let me check you can see that properly. Yeah, this is Rumble, but whether or not you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, there will be a show more button in the description where you can hopefully see that there's links both to part 1. You can also watch the whole 9-hour deposition video in one go yourself, and I recommend people go and do that. There is some crazy information that comes out. Yeah, there's also a playlist on YouTube which will let you see what's happening on there. Okay, we're going to get on because there's a lot of footage. Okay, thanks for the feedback, Rosie. If I do anything silly, then please give us a yell in the live chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on it and follow it as we go. So we'll do a quick catch up from the last sort of 6 episodes, although I would recommend, if you haven't seen them, go and find the playlist in the description. And the first couple of parts were establishing Stanley, the expert witness, who's testifying that these treatment plans are actually safe. We find out about his, what he gets paid for working for these companies that in no way could, they do a very good job of establishing Stanley's financial interest in the product that he's come in here to testify is safe to use. Part 3, we found out about, oh goodness me, I did have this written down, so let me bring up my notes. I'm sure we found out that when Stanley in part 2 submitted court documents to, the documents that basically qualify him as an expert witness, he admitted all his that he was members on the board of a lot of manufacturers of the companies, as it would suggest a conflict of interest. We found out that one of the vaccines that Stanley Plotkins had produced made it onto the CDC, which in America publish a list of vaccines that every child should be taking, and the people involved in voting whether or not a vaccine gets in happened to have financial, like he owned a patent on the very vaccine they were voting in. And as we found out, these people make millions on their business interests. Part 4, they went into some detail about how testing, the safety testing is done on these products. Turns out that the information included in the flyers, or the patient information leaflets, as we call them here in the United Kingdom, that they package with the treatment, they only list any adverse reactions noticed in like 4 or 5 days. The testing period is literally days. I think in one case it was 48 hours, and in other cases there was no record of any safety testing. Part 5, we found out some crazy statistics about those experiments. Sorry, I say experiments, the testing they did. One of the things that caught my attention, let's bring Stanley's lovely face up, by the way. Yeah, one of the things that grabbed me on that was when they asked Stanley, because they test to see whether or not that a vaccine will cause reported adverse reactions, and in one case they found that they have like a what they call a test group, which people that are taking a placebo or a completely different vaccine. And when they said how come there were no adverse reactions in the test group who didn't receive it, whereas there were, something like 2.3% of people ended up getting autoimmune disease within, I don't know how, whatever, you'll have to go back and watch it. That's part 5. And part 6 is very much about, again, the testing, that the information just isn't there to say whether or not treatments cause any they do find that they do cause certain adverse reactions. Stanley does admit that in part 6, but for a lot of them, the big one being autism, DTaP and Tdap are 2, typhoid, diphtheria, and you'll have to watch it. They do go into details in part 6 about how the testing just hasn't been done to determine a causal relationship or not. So we're going to carry on now with part 6. Right, we'll go over, before we start, I will bring up our webcam, just to say hello to anyone who's made it with us this evening. Thank you for taking the time. Much appreciated. I didn't line my camera up very well there, so apologies. I probably won't turn that on again. Okay, Rosie, thanks for being here with us. If anyone else is tuned in and they want to say hello, that would be brilliant. But for now, we're going to carry on. In the catch-up, which we did in the pre-show, which will be cropped off the end of this video, we found out they were just talking about how the Aaron Siri, the counsel for the plaintiff, was asking Stanley, do you agree we just don't have, we haven't established that vaccines do not cause autism, we can't say that. And Stanley was trying to put his own spin on it and wouldn't answer questions. He seems, I don't know, make your own judgment. Obviously, this guy's sitting in a chair for hours taking these questions, being forced to basically declare everything. It seems to me, every so often, he gets to a point where he looks like he's just going to get up and walk out. He's literally had enough. And I think that is very much the aim of Aaron Siri and Amy Ruby. Is their job is to get this guy to quit, not to testify. So they do ask him a lot of some may seem irrelevant questions, but okay, so we're going to carry on with Stanley being questioned about the efficacy, or no, the safety testing.
Plotkin.
I just have to sort out my audio 1 second. Otherwise, I'm hearing a feedback. Okay, here we go.
Was the IOM able to identify a single study that supported your claim? Strike that. If you take a look at that section, please, was the IOM able to identify a single study supporting that DTaP or TDAP do not cause autism?
No, they did not identify a study.
Okay.
But the point is, and I have to repeat myself, that...
You see, Stanley wants to answer a different question. He wants to be asked, did studies find that vaccines cause autism? And that's what Stanley wants to be asked, but Aaron's asking him a very specific question.
Absence of evidence does not allow you to conclude that the two phenomena are related.
You're making assumptions, Dr. Plotkin, about, I think, what's built and not. I understand that. I mean, I only interrupt because, you know, it's 3 o'clock and I don't mind letting you, you know, give a lot of discussion about things that aren't relevant, but to the question.
I think it's relevant in the reports issued by the IOM,
yes,
that their conclusion about evidence not being available,
yes,
does not allow you to conclude that the phenomena, that there is a causal relationship.
I'm not sure. No, I never said that, and I'm not sure anybody in this room said that, Dr. Plotkin.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
But it does allow you to conclude that the evidence doesn't exist to say that DTaP and TDAP do not cause autism, correct?
There is not evidence to say a million different things.
Okay.
You have to prove.
Did the IOM report look at whether the MMR vaccine can cause autism?
I'd have to look and see.
Yes,
I believe that
it
they did.
And what did it find? Found? I'm sorry. They said it did. And
This is where Stanley's going to have to point.
I'm looking to see.
He has to say that, yeah, we are able to test whether or not our vaccines cause autism, because it turns out this one that he's looking for, yeah, they find it does not cause autism. So yeah, there is a way of testing, but they seem to be lacking.
it said it favors rejection because it did find studies.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
That's right. So studies are possible to determine whether or not a vaccine does or does not cause autism, correct?
They are possible, yes.
Yes. Okay. But the study to determine whether DTaP or TDAP does not cause autism has not been done, right?
A study that would definitively show that it doesn't has not been done.
Right. What we got to a point at the end of the last installment, part 6, was I never understood why Stanley was saying it would be did he say immoral, or I can't remember the exact word he used, but I never unethical. He said it would be unethical to do another study into these vaccines, and I couldn't understand why. And his argument is that to do a study that tells us definitively whether or not one of their treatments does or doesn't cause autism would involve children not receiving his product. He believes children not being vaccinated would be unethical. So someone not using a product that he's got a financial interest, according to him, is unethical.
But there's no evidence that it does.
Okay. But since, Dr. Plotkin, we don't know whether DTaP or TDAP cause autism, right? It would be a bit premature to make the unequivocal sweeping statement that vaccines do not cause autism, correct?
In the absence of evidence, one should not draw any conclusions except that there is no evidence. And so I don't infer from the absence of evidence about a million different things that they're necessarily true. One has to do studies to determine whether or not a phenomenon exists, and usually those studies are done because there is some suspicion that of a relationship. But we have
Stanley's about to tell us there's absolutely no suspicion that any of his products causes autism. I think some people do suspect that, actually.
have no suspicions, at least I don't, that...
And there you go. He has no suspicions. He could not even consider a negative consequence coming from his product. He's a salesman, basically. Almost like a politician who cannot say a negative thing about their own product.
autism is caused by DTAP.
Well, you may not have that suspicion, but it is one of the most commonly reported conditions, adverse events, which is why it was reviewed in this IOM report from DTaP, TDAP, which we discussed earlier. So I'm not asking you to say that vaccines do cause autism. I'm not asking that at all. I'm asking you as a scientist, can you make the statement that vaccines do not cause autism if you don't know whether DTaP or TDAP cause autism?
As a scientist, I would say that I do not have evidence one way or the other.
By the way, I don't believe Stanley is a scientist. He's a drug manufacturer or vaccine manufacturer. He makes a product. He creates something that is injected into millions of people. His work isn't in regards to testing. He doesn't even believe stopping the use of his product long enough to test something is ethical.
Right.
As a practicing physician, I have to weigh all kinds of things in making a decision about a patient, whether to do something or not to do something. And I make those decisions based on the body of knowledge, even in the absence of definitive information for every case. This has been true for medicine ever since its inception.
I'm asking you a simple question. I'm asking you, since the science has not yet been done regarding whether DTaP or TDAP cause autism, isn't it true that you cannot make the sweeping statement that vaccines do not cause autism?
I could make the statement that there is no evidence that vaccines cause autism.
Yes, Stanley, no evidence because the studies have not been done because, according to you, they're unethical. It would be unethical.
Okay.
And therefore,
I'm not asking you that
and
question.
Therefore,
Dr. Plotkin,
and therefore,
yeah.
vaccines.
He's not answering the question.
And therefore, vaccines should be given to protect against serious diseases.
Will Dr. Plotkin, if we've already reviewed the IOM report, the IOM could not find evidence that DTaP or TDAP cause autism. I'm asking you, knowing that, isn't it just a bit premature to make the unequivocal sweeping statement that vaccines do not cause autism?
I would say it is logically true that you cannot you cannot point to proof that it doesn't cause autism. But as physicians and public health specialists, one has to make decisions in the absence of thousands of pieces of information that one would like to have.
In which case, what do you think sways Stanley's decision making if he hasn't got definitive information on whether this treatment could be seriously harmful or not? What's the next thing he's going to go to? Because Could it be the interest of the people that pay him?
And one of them is that vaccines protect against serious infectious diseases, and there's no evidence that they cause autism. So therefore, I recommend vaccinations to this child and every other child who does not have a contraindication.
But since there's no evidence that DTaP or Tdap don't cause autism, you can't yet say that vaccines do not cause autism, correct?
I cannot say that as a scientist or a logician, but I can say as a physician that no, they do not cause autism. Because as a physician, I have to take the whole body of scientific information into consideration when I make a recommendation for a child.
No, Stanley, you've actually already told us that the whole body of science doesn't include these studies. That isn't something you take into consideration. So what science he does take into consideration, I have no idea, but...
Their IOM reviewed the science. They didn't find a single study that supported whether or not vaccines...
Forgive me. Counsel, your connection's not that great. It's very choppy, and I cannot hear anything you're saying, but I do hear your voice.
The crackly voice you hear in the background is that of Laura Newer, the counsel for the defendant, which is the father in this case. The people, she's basically protecting Stanley from being, having fallacious logic chucked his way.
Please repeat.
All right, at this point, Dr. Plotkin, just wait for him to move on to the next question.
I'm not asking the same question, Counselor. Your objection is noted. I'm responding to his comments, which are different every time. So, okay, so what you're saying is, as a physician or logician, then you couldn't say vaccines do not, you could not say vaccines do not cause autism. But as a pediatrician, you're saying that you would say that to a parent because you want to make sure they get the vaccine. Is that right?
You know, I can't be sure that DTaP doesn't cause leprosy. That doesn't mean that that stops me from using a DTaP vaccine.
Are people claiming that DTaP has caused leprosy? Are you aware of any such complaints?
I'm not aware of any such complaints, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it on the web one of these days.
Well, interesting admission from Dr. Stanley Plotkins there, linking his product to leprosy without any suggestion of it whatsoever.
Okay, but people have made enough complaints about DTaP, Tdap causing autism that the Institute of Medicine at the commission of HHS thought it was serious enough to do a scientific review, correct?
Yes.
Okay. They didn't review whether DTaP causes leprosy, did they?
No.
Okay. So, and after conducting that review, they found that there was no evidence at all they could find whether DTaP or Tdap cause autism. I'm just asking you a simple question, which is, since there's no evidence that whether DTaP or Tdap cause autism, isn't it a little premature to say, to make the sweeping statement that vaccines do not cause autism?
No, I do not agree with that, because absence of evidence works both ways.
Okay, so Stanley is saying, I disagree. You should be able to say this product does not cause autism, even if you don't know that, even if there's no definitive studies backing up his claim. He should still be able to say that, as Aaron pointed out, because he wants a parent to agree to let their child take their product.
There's no evidence that they do, and the ideal study has not been done. I agree with that, but in the absence of any reasonable evidence that they do, I continue to recommend their use.
Okay. So you're willing to make a statement that a vaccine does not cause a condition, even in the absence of any evidence?
I'm willing to state that there is no evidence that the vaccine causes the condition, and there is a lot of evidence that they do protect against disease, and therefore the child should receive the vaccines. I mean, there are a million things on the web, including all kinds of diet.
By the way, well done, Aaron. Just let him keep talking, because he's now going to probably make another admission, talking about what he's seen on the web.
Advice based on ridiculous information. So why should I adopt that?
Are you saying that the IOM was engaging in a ridiculous review here?
They were doing a scientific review, which is certainly legitimate, and their conclusion that there are insufficient data to draw a formal conclusion. I can understand that.
Then it wasn't a very good scientific experiment if it didn't prove either if it didn't prove one way or the other, then it wasn't really a scientific experiment.
And appreciate that. But that does not mean that the vaccines cause autism.
You've never been asked that. The only thing I've asked you is whether or not one can assert that vaccines do not cause autism.
Counselor,
not that they do.
Let's be real. You're asking me these questions because you want me to legitimize a view that vaccines cause autism, and I will not do that, because absence of evidence is no proof whatsoever.
I think that record is very clear, Dr. Plotkin. I'm not trying to legitimize anything. I'm just asking you to. I'm not trying to legitimize that vaccines cause autism. I think we have very clearly established what the IOM found. The IOM found, in their estimation, no evidence. Right?
Right.
They found no evidence that vaccines do cause that DTaP or TDAP cause autism. Let's make that very clear, right?
Right.
They found no evidence
Right.
that DTaP or TDAP cause autism.
Yes.
Period. They found one study which they said was unreliable because it relied on VAERS data and it had no control. Right?
Right.
Okay. But similarly, in the same vein,
By the way, the test that they said they did, but it was unreliable because it came from their data, I believe is the test done by the vaccine manufacturers, and they said, well, we can't rely on this company, they've got a conflict of interest.
they also didn't find any evidence that DTaP, TDAP do not cause autism. Now that doesn't mean that DTaP, TDAP do cause autism, correct?
Correct.
It doesn't mean that, right?
Yes.
That's right. All it means is that they couldn't find a study that showed that supported that it does not cause autism, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's why they reached the conclusion that they did, which is they said the data is insufficient, right? I assume was that a yes?
Yes.
All right. Do you agree with the IOM's conclusion that the evidence is insufficient to determine whether or not TDAP, DTaP cause autism?
I agree with their conclusion, but that doesn't mean that I don't act on other information.
Oh, it sounds like Stanley might be withholding information here. Has he got some other studies that confirm a product does or does not cause a particular adverse effect?
Okay. I can understand that. But I'm not saying that I'm not asking you to ignore any benefits you believe accrue from vaccines. Okay? I'm not asking you to do that at all, Dr. Plotkin. I'm simply asking you as a pure matter of logic. as a pure matter of logic and common sense, if you don't know whether A causes something, can you say A, B, let me not use a hypothetical. If you don't know whether DTaP or TDAP cause autism, shouldn't you wait until you do know, until you have the science to support it?
Definitely not. Stanley will not go along with that. And I also noticed that Stanley didn't object when Aaron said about his belief that his belief of the benefits of taking his product. He didn't say, "Oh, it's not a belief. We've tested it. We know." Although they have done a lot more thorough studies, the manufacturers themselves, into the what they call the efficacy of the products, how efficient and how long they last for, or how long they keep affecting the body for.
To then say...
Oh, also, since they're going on about studies, there was an interesting... They talked about, I think it was probably part 4, they talked about one of the studies they did where they found the same amount of people in the control group as the people receiving the treatment became ill with whatever it was they were. I don't know, let's say it was whooping cough, because that seems to be one that comes up a lot. Yeah, the same amount of people, whether they received the vaccine or not, contracted whooping cough. But anyway.
That vaccines do not cause autism?
Do I wait? No, I do not wait, because I have to take into account the health of the child.
He has to take into account his bank balance, I think he actually means.
And so for that reason, you're okay with telling the parent that DTaP, TDAP does not cause autism, even though the science isn't there yet to support that claim?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm also willing to tell them it doesn't cause leprosy.
Okay. Again, did the IOM review whether DTaP causes leprosy?
No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, while we're at a moment where they're shuffling pages, I'm just going to bring up the live chat as Rosie in the chat, who I very much appreciate taking the time to comment. Thanks for being with us, Rosie. Says they can't say just because people don't get sick that that's because of their product, because that's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like if I said, oh, here in the United Kingdoms, if you put a spray on you, you're not going to get attacked by a bear, and everyone that used that spray didn't get attacked by a bear, or let's say bitten by a cobra. And you say, yeah, the spray really works. You see, no one's been bitten by... Well, there's no cobras in Britain except for ones at zoos. But it's on that level, you know. You could say, well, no one's been bitten by a cobra, assuming that's what cobras do, and they don't wrap... That's constrictors that wrap themselves around you. Anyway, it would be like forcing people at the zoo to put on this spray because, well, look at all our tests. No one... Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Rosie. That's why I bring up your comment. Thanks for interjecting. Thanks for being with us.
Dr. Plotkin, has there ever been a study which looked at the total health outcomes of children following the CDC's vaccination schedule and those who are completely unvaccinated, such as Faith?
That's a big question, and Stanley's face says it all. Unfortunately, we can't skip back. He almost had looked like some sort of seizure come over him. His face grimaced, where he was asked a very specific question about whether a test has been done.
Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't think so. But you know, there are all kinds of studies. There's a study that suggests that children who are vaccinated compared to unvaccinated children have lower rates of leukemia. Now, do I believe that study? I find it interesting, but I would want confirmation.
So he said children that have not been vaccinated have lower rates of leukemia. Did I hear that correctly, or was it the other way round? Unfortunately, I cannot skip back, but anyone watching, yeah, can. Double tap your screen and it will go back 10 seconds.
Of that study before I believed it. But just to point out that Peter Abbey, for example, as I mentioned before, found that measles vaccination had a positive effect on health and reduced mortality. I think there is abundant evidence that vaccines do contribute to the health of children. But in answer to your question, there is no study that I know of that compared the health of vaccinated children with unvaccinated children.
Why has that study not been done?
Probably because...
Stanley's going to say, oh, it'd be a waste of time. We know children who receive our treatment is more healthy. And thanks to Rosie, who confirmed his words, he said that children with it, who have received their product, don't get it. Yeah, of course he was going to bring up that study. He was just going to make sure he dropped it in. He's had to make a lot of admissions, talking about leprosy and stuff, so he thought he would get a positive one in.
It is considered bad malpractice not to vaccinate a child.
Really, Stanley, malpractice not to give, or perhaps it is that way in the United States, and how fortunate for his company that it happens to be that way. I'm sure he's not going to let that opinion change anytime soon. It will always be considered malpractice not to use his product. Make sure you've got your Cobra spray ready next time you go out.
So you're saying a prospective study might be improper because it will leave a child unvaccinated?
Correct.
Okay. What about a retrospective study?
That, I suppose, could be done, but it wouldn't be randomized.
Look at him tapping his fingers now.
When I say retrospective, that means using existing data, correct?
Using children.
Why don't I ask you, strike that. Can you define retrospective, please?
I mean, looking at children who had been vaccinated and comparing them to children who had not been vaccinated.
Okay. Presumably, HMOs, insurance companies would have health data on enough vaccinated and unvaccinated children to conduct such a comparison, correct?
Well, I don't know, because the percentage of unvaccinated children, fortunately, is quite low. So...
He is always going to claim that the test group is always too small to accurately get a good reading from.
I'm not sure how easy it would be to do that study. And I would suspect that many of those unvaccinated children are not in registers that could be used.
You're familiar with the Vaccine Safety Data Link?
Yes.
Are you aware that there are a few thousand children that are, are you aware that there are reports from the government reports that show that there are a few thousand children that are, my understanding, completely unvaccinated in the VSD?
Oh, I don't doubt it.
Okay. Couldn't the Vaccine Safety Data Link be used to conduct a retrospective vaccinated versus unvaccinated study to look for health outcomes?
I'm guessing Stanley's going to say something about control groups now. That will be his get out on this one.
Well, I don't know. Theoretically, perhaps, but one would have to be convinced that the children were comparable in other ways besides being vaccinated or unvaccinated.
Okay. Every time you do a retrospective study, that you always need to control for potential co-founders, correct?
Correct.
And that's what you're talking about, controlling for co-founders, right?
Yes.
And you know, if you're doing a case control, properly matching cases, or if you're right, are you saying that? I mean, the CDC, pharma, they conduct studies all the time, right? Including studies,
Yes.
yes, including studies that have co-founders that need to be controlled for, right?
Yes, they
Vaccines?
try, yes.
Vaccine studies, especially for efficacy, happen all the time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they seem to be the only tests that pharmaceutical companies are actually interested in doing is ones on efficacy. That seems to be because they're working out, or how often, if we say, well, our product stops working after a couple of years, you better come and get at least 5 more, get one every 5 years or something. That is possibly why it's of such a big interest. Whether or not it gives a person serious autoimmune diseases afterwards, that's irrelevant.
So, again, if the data is there, why not do a study comparing vaccinated to completely unvaccinated children to look for the total health outcomes, so you know what the real risks are from vaccine, or get at least a sense of what the real risks are from vaccinations.
By the way, keep this as a mental note. I don't think it would necessarily come up in this hourly segment, but for future reference, Stanley is so caring and considerate of people that he wouldn't want a child to be unvaccinated. It's just all about their health. He really cares about people's health. Just make a mental note of that, and we'll see if anything is suggested during this. I do, of course, have the benefit of having watched this years ago, a couple of years back. So I'm not watching it for the first time, but I do not remember it all. Anyway, we'll carry on.
Well, I can't completely answer that question. I'm sure it would be a difficult study to do, but I will repeat what I said earlier about measles.
Why would it be a difficult study to do? You're just looking at the health records of people which are already available. It wouldn't be, you're not adding new information. The test that the study that Aaron is suggesting is making use of, as they say, retrospective data, information already out there.
Measles vaccination. I would just remind you again that among those children who were not
You've already
vaccinated,
said all this, Dr. Plotkin.
yeah,
Fine.
well, I'm going to repeat
I've got
it.
But
Yeah, Stanley wants to make clear that the only way he would be interested in one of these tests, if the only difference between the two, let's say, I think they're talking about children, but specifically, the only difference between the two children was that they hadn't received vaccines. They must all come from the same ethnic background. They must all have grown up in this, with access to the same sanitary or unsanitary conditions. Yeah, he wants to massively I'm not saying it's overcomplicating it. It is how you have only the one variable. That is a scientific experiment. So to make it science, yeah, okay, he's correct. But just to do a study to look at the numbers, yeah, okay.
There are three deaths and 24 cases of encephalitis.
Okay.
And that's unbearable.
I'm sorry. Can you read?
3 people dying from cephalitis is unbearable. The possibility that hundreds, maybe even thousands of children are being affected by the product he's taken, that's an afterthought. That isn't even worth considering or testing for, doing a study for.
Back what Dr. Plotkin just said.
We were talking over each other.
I apologize.
Well, I can't completely answer that question. I'm sure it would be a difficult study to do, but I will repeat what I said earlier about measles vaccination. I'll just remind you again that among these children who were not DASH, you've already said all this, Dr. Plotkin. I got it. Answer, well, I'll repeat it. 3 deaths and 24 cases of encephalitis. That's unbearable.
Okay, well, there's a law just that if you're not familiar with courts, they've got a person in the court that's writing down everything that's been said. So every so often they'll go back and ask for them to recap, or if he didn't hear it, for example. Or maybe he just wants to place emphasis on his words.
Excuse me, my plug is stuck under. Give me 2 seconds again.
Take your time.
He certainly seems to be letting it sink in.
Is that a problem? Okay. No, it's all right. Dr. Plotkin, who prepared the notes that are in front of you?
Me,
Okay, when did you prepare those?
about a week ago, I guess.
Okay. During the break, our lunch break, did you talk with anybody?
No, well, yes, I talked with my wife.
Anybody else?
No.
Okay. So I understand that you find injuries that can result from what you've called, I believe, vaccine preventable diseases. What we're trying to do is understand the risks of vaccinating, and in particular for faith. And can you appreciate that? Understand. Strike that. So,
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, remember, here in the United Kingdom, up to 3 people a year get bitten by a cobra. Those people working in circuses or zoos or snake charmers or whatever. Worldwide, 3 people get bitten by a cobra. So make sure you spray up. All that would be avoidable if you put on our spray.
you just think it's too difficult to look at, to do a study comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated children, even though the data exists to do that. Is that right?
Well, I simply am saying that I don't know how feasible it is. I've never been asked to look at it before, but I do think a priori that it would be difficult because those children are very likely from different socioeconomic groups and different racial groups, and so it will be a difficult study to do. I don't know if it's feasible or not.
So with all of the government, so the pharmaceutical industry, you said, made approximately $20 billion last year?
Nope, he actually said 50 billion, of which the big 4 pharmaceutical companies, I think it was Merck, we'll have to watch back, but they took 20 billion of that 50. I'm pretty sure that's what the numbers were. Let's see if Stanley corrects him, or if he goes with that convenient mispronouncing. I think it was okay, we'll see. Maybe I got it wrong. Perhaps it was 20 billion. I thought it was 50.
In revenue from vaccine sales?
I think so. I don't.
I have the financial statements. Mm-hmm. Should we review them, or do you think 20 billion is about right?
I think it's about right.
Okay, my mistake. It was 20 billion. I don't know where I got 50 billion from.
I'm not an accountant. I don't
give or take
read those.
Give or take $1 billion or $2 billion, would you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
So the pharmaceutical industry has had $20 billion in revenue, and the CDC spends hundreds of millions of dollars buying vaccines every year. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay. But yet you don't think that the resources can be done to do a single, solitary study comparing the health outcomes of a for-profit product given to almost every child in this country?
Not exactly what he's saying, Aaron. He's saying, yeah, do them all you want. I just won't pay any attention to them because of all the different economic backgrounds that some of the kids might have come from. Whether or not they've taken my treatment plan would make no difference to any findings. I think that's actually what he's saying. So they're not even worth looking at.
To assess what the rate of adverse reactions are between those who get all those products and those who don't?
What I said is I simply don't know whether such a study is feasible or not, but I think it would be difficult to do because it would not be a randomized study.
Yeah, so you're not saying it's difficult to do, Stanley. You're saying it would be a pointless exercise. It would be of no regard as far as you're concerned.
And therefore the conclusions might be questionable. But I don't know whether such a study is feasible or not.
Aren't most studies that are done that you rely upon in that book that you have in front of you not randomized?
Many of them are not, many of them are.
Okay. Do you throw out the ones that are not randomized?
No, it depends on what the purpose of the study is.
Yes, Stanley, it depends on whether or not it puts your product into a good light, whether or not you use the study. When it could be something that potentially makes his product look bad, he absolutely will not want to know about it. $20 billion industry. They don't want to do anything to tilt that ship. And this was, by the way, back in 2018, before, as I like affectionately call it, BS19 came knocking. And after that, the amount of money spent on vaccines would have gone up, no doubt, ridiculous amounts. I'm speculating, but I'm going to put that guess out there, particularly on one major product that they decided to use. And I wonder if Stanley had any input on that. It'd be interesting to know. Right, we're going to let them go to the end of their sentence, then we're going to have to go for an intermission because I got to use the facilities, or I'll be hopping around in a sec if I don't. And I've also got to refill my drink. But yeah, we'll be going, at the most, we'll be going for another hour, including the intermission. So we'll let them get to the end of this sentence.
If it's studying immune responses, it doesn't necessarily have to have a control group.
Dr. Plotkin, I'm going to hand you what's being marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 23.
Okay, at Exhibit 23, we're going to call an intermission. I'm going to have to take a break. Rosie, I really do appreciate you being with us this evening. Thank you for commenting in the chat. If anyone else out there wants to say hello, that would be great to see you. Or if you just want to, another way of showing your appreciation is if you want to hit the thumbs up button, then that would be a massive compliment to me and to tonight's episode of The Second Sign. Right, we've got a video that goes back to, let me see, what was it called? It was called Scripted Outrage by Jeff Schroeder, someone who got very angry about, something Balenciaga did. August the 6th, 2023, I think this video might have come out. Oh no, that's when I uploaded it to this channel. I think it probably goes back a fair way further than that. Actually, I'll be able to tell you. I would estimate that I uploaded this video in December 2022. It was streamed live, the original video. Yeah, this goes back to December 2022 then. Okay. And it's called Scripted Outrage, Jeff Schroeder. I'm going to have to, as I say, dash over and use the facilities while I leave you with this. Okay. Yeah, thanks for your patience. I'll be back with you very soon. This video actually goes on for 9 minutes, but I might cut in if I'm back in time. Okay, as I say, thanks for watching us. Thanks for being with us this evening. Back in about 5-10 minutes. Over here we can see relevant people on. So let me just start things off by inviting anyone who wants to thumb this video up. That's always appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please do so. And if you want to share any of my videos over on social media, that is massively appreciated. I would also like to thank my Patreon, Linda Mack, and let anyone know if you want to see what I do over on Patreon. There's a link in the description and a QR code on the screen now. I did come across this video just the other day.
Where's the outrage? I'm going to go off for a minute here because where is the outrage? It's been a week and a half And now we're doing this story. I get it. Thanksgiving was happening and all that. But they tried to hide behind that, right? Maybe this will make it through the news cycle. No, it's not, okay? Adidas didn't cut ties 48 hours after Kanye did his whole thing, right? And they got lambasted for not speaking out against anti-Semitism. This is a week and a half, and nobody seems to care that there's little kids involved in this. I can't speak what it's like to be a black man, right? I can't speak what it's like to be a Jewish woman, but I can speak what it's like to be a father of 2 young boys. And that this type of behavior, when I worked at CBS.com out of a little closet my first show, I was like, I'm going to say this and wear a blue shirt. I got 49 emails saying, maybe wear a purple shirt and maybe don't say this here. Don't tell me this slipped through the cracks when you're getting a court case that features child pornography. It's disgusting. It's disturbing. Jeopardy's got to flip their whole production because of one person said something, but they wanted to be woke and do all that. How many other examples are there? 10, 20, 30, 40 years we're going back to cancel people? But this slips through the cracks. It's outrageous. And that people aren't outraged and skipping work with their posters and going to the courthouse or going to Balenciaga, and stars aren't wiping their Instagram and social media with all their Balenciaga gear is disgusting in itself. Don't you tell me, Hollywood, how to live my life, or you want me canceled, or because you produce something. You're going to go around because Balenciaga pays you $1 million, $2 million, $5 million? Kim Kardashian, shame on you. You're a billionaire. You don't need this company. They need you. And for you to take a week and a half to come to a conclusion, shame on you.
You can hear the scripted outrage. Well, look at the tweet. It's by someone called Rob Smith. They happen to have this blue tick next to their name. What might that be all about? Nearly 250,000 followers over on Twitter. Who is he? Over here we can see relevant people on Twitter. He's an Iraq vet, Columbia University, president of the Douglas Society, whatever that is. Frequently Fox News. He's a deputy editor. He is mainstream media, just like this guy, Jeff Schroeder, is mainstream media. Happens to put a 23 in his name. Is this anger as raw as it might first appear? He talked about when he started on CBS. He just flashed it very quickly there. Watch this hand here. What is his left hand? And he just very
involved in this.
Quickly flashes the devil horns. There he goes, he's ripped his earpiece out. The producers are screaming at him, stop going off script, you've gone rogue. Bear in mind what I was saying just a few episodes back. The people that have been lying to you for all these years, reading the news, paid liars, that's what they are. Just because they start saying things that actually sound truthful, sound like what you want to hear, don't suddenly start thinking that they're all of a sudden on the level. We will actually be looking at what this guy was so outraged about very soon, where he does the 666 hand symbol. There we go. Is it just a hand symbol that he happened to flash up to demonstrate what he was saying, or was it completely part of it? News programs like this, once a newsreader goes off script, you know what they do? Boom, they close you down like that. You don't get heard. They do not let someone start screaming about anything, especially not a subject as touchy as what could be seen as slanderous, and where he's going on about Balenciaga. Just reading some of the comments from some of these people, this is great stuff. A person with an informed, fact-based point of view. No, he's a newsreader, I'm afraid. He's just saying what he's been told, and he's putting his job at risk for something that matters, protecting children. He's doing none of these such things. He's making you aware of something they want you to be fuming about. Who's this guy? No doubt another newsreader or presenter. I actually know Jeff from my time on CBS Big Brother. Awesome guy. Yes, Big Brother. Interesting they say that. Jeff Schroeder. Not only is he a newsreader, there's something you can see in the background. Marriage Boot Camp, reality stars. These people are reality TV stars. It may well be American, but I think they do it the same way as we do over here. Think of all the reality TV stars we've got over here. Jake Quickenden, Ex on the Beach, Ashley Kane and Safiye Voronin, who sold a story of a dying child, who I've covered quite heavily. Jade Goody, another reality TV star. Yeah, these people cannot be trusted. This is one of the fashion piece. I actually blurred the image of the child. And we're going to look at what they've presented here. And then I'm going to compare it to something that happened in a British soap opera not that long ago, and ask, is it really that different? How can someone get so worked up about this, which I agree is bloody weird. I mean, it's teddy bears with bondage gear on. Got one with a boy as well. So they've got the same teddy bear in it, just in this bottom corner. Also, interesting world they've drawn on the wall there. You've got this horrible bear just here, of course. You've also got, just on the bedside table, got this white rabbit. I do remember asking some time ago, you know, what is the relevance with white rabbit? Because we seem to see it everywhere. If we look at that other image once again on the bed to Satan, white rabbits were also a pretty significant part in the story of Archie Battersby. If you're not familiar with Archie, he was a young lad that was on life support for a long time, and his mother kept going to appeal courts to stop his machine being turned off. I called it out as being the usual fabricated, horrific stories that we get given on mainstream. Looking at the way the mother acted, didn't have the emotions of a mother who genuinely was, you know, trying to keep her child alive. Horrible, horrible stories. And another one was the story of Olivia, a girl in Liverpool. I think she was 9. She was shot by mistake. She was also featured with a white rabbit. I'm not sure, but I was told it is a reference to child abuse or something along those lines. Let me show you what a British soap opera thought perfectly reasonable. This episode is from the 30th of June 2022. In the story, he's gay, just split up with his partner because the partner thought he had cheated on him, but really he'd been raped by a man. Vile, disgusting story. Typical cheerful EastEnders.
Dad, you could get me something tonight.
Tonight?
At the Pride Fair.
Oh, where did you get these?
Callum got them ages ago. They were all like bag of chips is going to be there. Please, 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 you have to take me.
That was the episode I was referring to. Now, I've called out EastEnders in the past for doing product placement where they advertise in things like the Spice Girls coming back. I mean, how many young children honestly go to their gay parents and say, please, please take me to gay pride. I've got to go. Does that really happen? I'm not sure what that bit was about all my favourite chips being there. Perhaps that's some gay reference. Okay, we're going to bring that intermission to a close. If you want to catch the rest of that, I will put a link to it in the live chat. By the way, good to see I've got 10 times the amount of viewers on Rumble to this live stream than I do over on YouTube. Anyone would think it was Rumble where I'd been live streaming for like 5 years rather than YouTube. So yeah, thanks to anyone tuned in over on Rumble. If you want to say hello in the live chat, it would be great to see a name come up. Right, yeah, this is a link to the Jeff Schroeder video. You do have to go over onto Dead YouTube, as I now call it, to watch it. Oh, by the way, Rosie's saying it seems they've used the Super Bowl incident wardrobe malfunction of that female in order to justify the time delay on all live everything, so they can cut it before anyone hears or sees anything. I'm not familiar with a Super Bowl, unless it was... I mean, was it Janet Jackson that had one of those? I'm not sure if that's the same thing. I guess that's what Josh Schroeder was talking about. Anyway, did I put a link in YouTube? Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Yeah, no doubt. They always have a big deal to make about these incidents that go on. Right, take the text off the screen. Yeah, so if you want to catch the rest of that Jeff Schroeder vid, then you can find it. Right, we're going to carry on with Stanley. Where were we? He was being handed a piece, some information. Exhibit 23, I think it was. So yeah, let's let them carry on. We will be... We're aiming to watch on this... video up to where it gets to 1400 hours, maybe just before, although I don't, here in the United Kingdom it's nearly 11:15, so I want to be done by midnight, so we'll see how we get on. And with that, let's see what Exhibit 23E is in reference to. After they were talking about, yeah, Stanley's book is something that he keeps saying, like when Aaron asks him for evidence to back up what he says, he basically tells him to buy his book, Stanley Plotkins' vaccine book. Should we see how much one of those costs? I think it's called Plotkins Vaccines. Every probably year or two he'll bring out a he'll bring out a new edition of this. Wow, this is what he's telling, in order, because he won't back up his claims a lot of the time. In order to verify what he's saying, he's telling Aaron, the co-counsel for the co-counsel for the plaintiff, to go and buy a $270 or £270, £285 book, rather than just he wasn't, in one of the parts, asked to back up one of the claims that he made. Right, we will get on. Exhibit 23.
I'm sorry. Do you, Dr. Plotkin, what's an ICD-9 code?
Well, it's essentially a way of coding diseases for, usually for remuneration purposes.
Okay. So when a
Remuneration purposes are, of course, for, that's ICD code would be the code they give if they've treated someone for, let's say, polio, one for diphtheria, Tdap, all these other things they've been bringing up, rotavirus. They'll each have their code in order for the pharmaceutical, the doctors or whatever, to make the sale, I think you could say.
a doctor administers a drug or diagnoses as a patient or something similar, there's a code that they would enter into the system, right?
Yes.
And the ICD-9 codes are published by the American Medical Association, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Please take a look at the exhibit I just handed you is the 2015 ICD-9 CM Professional Edition for Physicians Codebook, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or at least the front page and one excerpt, correct?
Stanley kind of looks like he wishes that chair could swallow him up at this moment. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you go to the second page, do you see there's a code V64.07?
Yes.
What is that code for?
Vaccination not carried out for religious reasons.
Okay. So wouldn't it be feasible, for example, to compare children who have this coding, who are not being vaccinated, with those who are being vaccinated, who are in similar communities, have similar demographics, and otherwise avoid as much as possible other potential co-founders?
Well, if you could eliminate the co-founders, it would be feasible.
And what are the co-founders, Dr. Plotkin?
Well, as I said before, the co-founders include a socioeconomic level, racial grouping, exposure to agents. In other words, are they living in a community where it's unlikely that someone unvaccinated from Ethiopia is going to come into the community and be...
Interesting. He's actually saying that unvaccinated people are potentially harmful and could, utter nonsense. A person that doesn't use his product is somehow dangerous. Ridiculous.
Be able to transmit diseases. There are, I'd have to sit down and write up a list of possible co-founders, but there.
Show one jot of proof that a person, because they haven't had your product, is more or less likely to be infectious. Is that rubbish?
But there would be many of them.
So when you do studies for efficacy, are you able to control for all of these co-founders?
Well, usually the effort is to include as many different types of individuals as possible, so that if there is a problem with a particular group, you can identify it. But doing clinical studies is not always easy, and that's why the conclusions from clinical studies have to be seen in relation to other clinical studies.
Why is it you can control for co-founders in various other vaccine studies, including in vaccine safety studies that are cited in your book, but you believe you? Are you saying you couldn't control for these same co-founders in the study of a vaccinated versus unvaccinated population?
I am unable to draw a conclusion about whether such a study is feasible. What I'm pointing out is that the likelihood of there being multiple co-founders is confounders, is very high, and therefore it wouldn't be an easy study to do. That's all I can say. I've never sat down to try to figure out how to do such a study.
Okay, well, we've got socioeconomic, which are probably pretty easy to control for, racial grouping, pretty easy to control for, exposure to agents. Since it's retrospective, you'll know if there's been an outbreak in a community. What other co-founders do you think might exist? I mean, I'd like to hear one that can you tell me a co-founder that's not easy to control for?
In principle, one can control for any confounding problem. The issue would be just how many there are and just how large a group you would need for statistical significance. See, that's another issue. I mean, we accept as a valid conclusion something that is false 5 times out of 100. And so not only do we have to try to eliminate confounders, but we also need repetition of studies to be sure that the results we got in the first study were not in the 5 studies that were false in their conclusion.
But
so you would need multiple studies.
Interesting. He's saying basically 5% of the studies they do are false, are wrong, inaccurate. They have to, that's their, I guess, estimate?
Okay. And since these are retrospective, they're really just running data, right?
If the data are encoded, yes.
Okay. So I asked earlier, what co-founder can you list that's not easy to control for? And I did not hear another co-founder.
No, he said in principle all co-founders or confounders are can be factored in.
Can you tell me a co-founder in this proposed study that would not be easy to control for?
Exposure would be probably the most difficult. In other words, whether a child is living in a community where exposure to disease is rare or absent, or a child is living in a community where there are significant possibilities of exposure. I think that would be probably the most difficult to account for.
When's the last case of polio in the United States, wild polio?
Oh.
Wild polio, does that mean that there's some domestic polio that they deliberately gave to people? I wonder if that's why I had to make that distinction.
I forget the exact year, but it's been probably 20, 25 years.
Would 1979 sound correct to you?
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. So that wouldn't be an issue, correct?
No,
Exposure?
polio would not be an issue.
Okay. How many cases of diphtheria have there been in the last 10 years in the United States?
It's very rare or absent.
All right. Less than 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Isn't that true for most of the diseases, except for maybe pertussis, right?
Well, pertussis, HIV, hepatitis, those are diseases that are still common.
Okay, so if we excluded...
Mumps,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Go ahead. mumps, pertussis. Okay. So since this is retrospective, we would know where those outbreaks are, right? Because they're very carefully tracked by the CDC, correct? Since we know where the outbreaks are for those diseases, that could be, was that a yes?
Yes.
Since we know where those outbreaks are, that could be actually probably pretty easily controlled for as well, correct?
In principle, yes.
Okay, so can you name me a co-founder that would be difficult to control for in the study?
Well, at the moment, I can't think of...
Exposure, meaning being around kids who haven't had the treatment. It could, basically what he's saying is that those that have had his treatment could still be exposed because of those horrible selfish people that haven't decided to use this treatment, that want to trust their God-given immune system, something we were all blessed with. And unless you want to give it away to a pharmaceutical company and say, do you know what, I don't need to use my God-given immune system, I'll use your product instead. And then you are reliant on these things. It's very unfortunate. Okay, I wouldn't ever say anything that goes against World Health Organization advice, of course, but I've done that once too often. It would be very unfortunate. All I'm going to say is to trade in your immune system, your ability to fight off infections, diseases, in exchange for an injection. Not worth it.
Any other that would be material, although I think one would have to look at genetic issues and the health of other members in the family and so forth. But again, I am not saying that such a study is impossible. I'm just pointing out that it would be a very difficult study to do, and
No, Stanley, it really wouldn't be a difficult study to do. You just don't believe, you just wouldn't take it seriously because because of some factors which sometimes, selectively are important, other times they're not, because
conclusions that you could draw from the study might be very limited.
Well, when you keep saying it's difficult, but and your reason for that, I understand, is potential co-founders, and I'm just trying to understand what those are. So you've said familial history, presumably the parents would be in the same health plan as the children, so you'd have the parents' medical history too, correct? So that could be controlled for as well, right?
Yes.
And you said, 2 questions ago, that was a yes? Okay. So that could be easily controlled for, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so can you tell me again, can you tell me a co-founder that would actually be difficult to control for in this study?
doesn't seem like he can, though.
Well, other than the ones that I've mentioned
the one he mentioned.
And not having thought about doing such a study, that's all I can say.
Okay. If you did such a study, are you aware that advocacy groups and other people interested in this issue have been calling for this exact study of comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated for 30 years already?
No, Stanley doesn't listen to people like that. If they're not saying, please sell us your product, Stanley, he doesn't listen to a word they say.
I don't spend a lot of time on the web, so I can't say that I know that such a study is being
Yeah, he doesn't listen to those crazy nutbags on the web, of course not.
requested.
Okay, well, if But you do read IOM reports and CDC
Yes.
reports. Okay. And you never come across any IOM or CDC reports in which they specifically address the repeated calls for such a study?
No.
Okay. Would it be surprising to you if I told you those existed?
That what existed?
That CDC and IOM reports in which they document the calls for such a study?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, no.
Would you
But he won't take them seriously, but he's not surprised they exist. But he, like he said, you can't draw any conclusions from these tests. I wonder why he said that.
be surprised to know that the CDC, in fact, issued an entire report regarding conducting such a study and the calls for conducting such a study?
And they issue the what, did you say?
I said, would you be surprised to know that the CDC, in fact, issued a report in response to the request for the calls for such a study?
No, I wouldn't be surprised that there was a response, no.
Okay. So, in looking for such a study, isn't it true that there actually has been one such study conducted in the past, for the first time ever, in the last year? Correct?
I'm not aware of that study.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 24. The title of this study is A Pilot Comparative Study of the Health of Vaccinated and Unvaccinated 6 to 12-year-old United States children, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the authors of this study are professors at the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics, School of Public Health, Jackson State University.
Okay, so far every study that has suggested any, in any way, vaccines could cause adverse effects. Stanley has made a point of discrediting it, saying, "Well, I don't regard that test because A, it didn't have a test group, or just suggesting that the people doing the study aren't credible." We'll see what he makes of this one.
Correct?
Just a minute.
That's what it says.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, let's just wait for co-counsel to get a copy.
Sorry about that.
I thought it had gone through.
It probably did go through because you hear a beeping noise every time a document's sent over.
Okay, so
Ms. Newsma, do you have it?
I shouldn't have. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
are you familiar with this pilot study, Dr. Plotkin?
No.
Okay.
I see it's been published in the Journal of Translational Science, which is not one of the journals I read.
He's going to
and
discredit
it's
it.
probably one of those multiple so-called predatory journals.
Predatory journals, that would be predatory against his income, I'm guessing we mean.
That we are trying to deal with currently.
So is anybody in...
Yeah, they're trying to deal with these studies and organizations that are coming after his income. Absolutely.
any university that publishes anything that's negative about vaccines predatory, or I forgot the other
No,
adjectives you used
it's not.
earlier
It's
today.
not that. Is that there are journals now that will publish anything for money.
Ah,
What a hypocrite. Anything for money. Isn't that right, Stanley? Fortunately, we do get to hear what you've done for money later on in this deposition.
And I get about 10 of those invitations a day.
so does money influence judgment,
It may.
conduct? Yeah.
It may. I
Okay.
cannot tell.
Ouch. Right. Bearing in mind he's had to say that he's received I think the biggest single payment he received, $6 million from a pharmaceutical company when they sold some license or something or other. It's in part 1 or 2. And now he's had to say, oh yeah, of course, well, finances may impair judgment and decision making.
Until I read this study.
I understand. So, well, in this study, if you look, if you take a quick look at it, you'll see that it involves looking at total health outcomes between vaccinated and unvaccinated homeschool children.
Yes.
Stanley's desperately scanning that document for something he can call out and say, don't agree with this, don't agree with that. I don't know. Perhaps we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He is just reading it for the first time, although I wouldn't be surprised if he's familiar with it, at least.
Okay. When you're ready, please turn to page 5. Do you see the row that says chickenpox?
Yes.
Okay, so the odds ratio for the unvaccinated were twice as likely. No, I'm sorry, 4 times as likely to get chickenpox, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 0.26, so odds ratio about 4. The kids who were unvaccinated were about 4 times more likely to get chickenpox. Okay, is that a yes?
Yes.
And do you see for whooping cough, the unvaccinated children were 3 times as likely to get whooping cough?
Yes.
Yes. Let's go down to where it says allergic rhinitis. What is
Yes.
that?
Stanley's going to suggest, it's just a pain in the arm or something like that. That's most of the things. He's minimized the adverse effects to be usually, just a bit of discomfort.
Well, it's essentially runny nose because of allergy.
Okay. Do you see that it says that the vaccinated children were 30 times as likely to have allergic rhinitis?
Yes, I see that number.
Do you see that it says that vaccinated children were 3.9 times as likely to have allergies?
Yes.
4.2 times as likely to have ADHD?
Yes.
4.2 times as likely to have autism spectrum disorder?
Yes.
2.9 times as likely to have eczema? 5.2 times as 5.2 times as likely to have learning disability?
Yes.
3.7 times as likely to have neurodevelopment disorder?
Yes.
And 2.4 times as likely to have any chronic condition?
Yes.
Okay.
By the way, chronic condition, that means a serious health condition. That isn't just a runny nose due to an allergy.
Wouldn't you like to see a larger scale study that refuted these claims?
It would be ideal, yes. It would certainly be important to repeat the study and to enroll patients in a blinded fashion. I really would have to read this to see exactly how they enrolled the children or the parents.
A blinded fashion is, of course, those where they don't know whether or not they've taken the treatment. Some of them may have received a placebo water tablet. Others may have received something different. And while others received the actual vaccine they're doing the study on, but they don't know which. They themselves don't know who's had what.
In the study.
Doesn't the existence of the study, though, strike that. Okay, so it at least calls for further similar studies, hopefully, to either confirm or disprove the findings in the study, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree.
Okay. And I'm going to show you one more study that was done with the same data from this author.
This predatory author, did Stanley refer to him as? Okay, during this quiet moment, I'm going to let you know we're going to be streaming for about another probably 10-15 minutes. We'll see, 15-20 at the most. So if you're still with us and you've been with us since the start,
Dr. Plotkins,
thanks for being here.
what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 25. Has it been sent? Okay. This is another study by this is another publication using the same data, I believe, from the same group of professors at the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics, School of Public Health, Jackson State University, correct?
It appears that way, yes.
Yeah.
Which, of course, isn't a publication or university Stanley reads the information from.
Okay, and the title of this one is Preterm Birth, Vaccination, and Neurodevelopmental Disorders, a cross-sectional study of 6 to 12-year-old vaccinated and unvaccinated children, correct?
Yes.
Preterm vaccination, does that mean they received it whilst the mother was pregnant? Is that what they're meaning?
Okay.
Whilst they were in the womb.
I'll give you a moment to read the abstract. Have you ever seen this study before?
No.
Okay, so just take a moment, please, and read the abstract. Okay.
Yes.
So in the middle of the abstract, I'm going to read two sentences, and you can tell me if I've read them correctly. No association was found between preterm birth and NDD in the absence of vaccination.
Okay, so where they weren't vaccinated, it wasn't found. None found.
Strike that. Actually, Dr. Plotkin, could you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down in the abstract? You see where it starts, no association?
Yes.
Can you read that sentence and the next one?
No association was found between preterm birth and NDD in the absence of vaccination, but vaccination was significantly associated with NDD in children born at term, odds ratio 2.7. Is that sufficient?
And the next sentence, please, sir. Thank you.
However, vaccination coupled with preterm birth was associated with increasing odds of NDD, ranging from 5.4 compared to vaccinated but non-preterm children to 14.5 compared to children who were neither preterm nor vaccinated.
Okay, preterm birth must be premature. Got it. My mistake. Nothing to do with them receiving the vaccine before, parents receiving the vaccine. No, this is children that were born premature, right? Against on time, as it were.
Okay. What does NDD stand for?
Neurodevelopmental disorders.
Right. And in this study, it was defined as learning disability, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, and autism spectrum disorder, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But I will also point out
Yes.
that the abstract says there was a convenience sample of 666 children. So clearly it was in no way a randomized study.
Shouldn't we do better studies?
one would have to do a better study if
Larger.
See, as always, Stanley's saying, well, the group, the test group wasn't big enough to pick up any of the conditions. So again, very dismissive of the experiment, of the testing.
Samples.
larger samples and enrollment, not by convenience.
Right. I believe Dr. Mawson calls these pilot studies, correct? Because nobody else is doing them, so he tried with limited resources, not the resources of pharmaceutical companies and the CDC, to conduct such a study, right?
Yeah, not the 20 billion a year.
Well, that's your interpretation. I would have to read the study.
Fair enough. More than fair. Is it possible that his findings in both of these studies could be correct?
Is it possible? Yes, of course. Possibility is always possible.
And hopefully, and ideally, you would conduct a larger or at least additional similar studies to either confirm or dispute the findings in these studies, correct?
Ideally, yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of randomization, if, to make sure I understand the concept, if I, for example, choose to vaccinate based solely on birth dates, would that be randomized?
Yes.
Okay. And that would be considered a randomized study?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked, with what is being marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 24. 26. Thank you. Sorry. This is the Peter Abe study that you and I were talking about earlier, correct?
This is one of them.
Right. This is the study in which Peter Abe found that children who received DPT in the first 6 months of life versus those who got no vaccines died at 10 times the rate, correct?
Right.
Wow, that's a sound clip, I think. Maybe at the beginning of our intros and outros, we've got Stanley answering a question about testing on vulnerable children. I think that's another soundbite. We'd just cut out that extended silence where he doesn't say anything for about 10 seconds and go from, children who had been vaccinated in this study in particular died at a rate 10 times that of those that hadn't received any.
And in this study, you earlier said that your concerns with Abe's prior studies that had similar conclusions was that they weren't randomized. But in this study, it was randomized, correct? Because it was, strike that. In this study, the vaccinated versus unvaccinated children were simply vaccinated or unvaccinated purely by the chance of when their birthday happened to be. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it says they were allocated by birthday. Have to, let's see.
I'm sure Stanley's read this report at least once or twice in the past, but we'll see.
Well, you know, it's not absolutely clear as to how the randomization was done. Apparently,
See, he said that word very quickly, and he's also covering his mouth when he says it. Randomization. Yeah, he's earlier stressed the importance of these studies being randomized, and he doesn't seem to want to admit or talk or say anything when it comes to actually establishing that they were randomized based on when the child was born, I believe, when their birthday fell, sorry.
periods of time when they were vaccinating and other periods when they were not vaccinating.
I think that if you have you read the study before, Dr. Plotkin?
I've glanced
Yes.
at it. Yes, I haven't read it thoroughly, but as I said before, this kind of study is useful. There's no doubt about that. But one needs to have some sort of immunological correlate to really confirm that the findings are real. The other point is that Peter is working in an African community where there is a high mortality to begin with, and
yeah, certainly a lot higher after they took your treatment, it would seem. In fact, I'm not sure if it's this one. I believe it comes up at some point. Yeah, we are drawn to the end of this installment, so it's he says that it was deemed, it might have already come up actually, a vaccine that he had worked on was deemed unsafe for kids in America, so they sold them all to Africa or something, or they were still in use in other parts of the world, even though they had been deemed unsafe for use in the United States. Crazy stuff.
that's of course because of other factors, and so whether this would be true in, let's say, Denmark or elsewhere is not clear. And if my memory serves, attempts to show in Denmark what Peter has found in Africa have not been positive.
Are you saying that there's a randomized study in Denmark comparing death rates between DPT and T?
It was.
1 second.
It was not.
Dr. Plotkin, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you got to let me, because the court reporter can't take down both of us talking, okay? I'm asking is there a study from Denmark that compared children who received DTP versus children who received no vaccines at all, that was randomized, like this study was, and that compared the death rate between the two groups?
Well, I'd have to go back and look, but my recollection is that because in Denmark everything is registered and they had excellent data on vaccines being given, that they did not find an effect on mortality of giving DTP. But
I didn't exactly say a study had been done there. He just said that they didn't make a finding. Okay, we'll see if Aaron lets him get by with that. Yeah, we are going to hit the brakes on this stream very shortly. Go a minute or two more.
Regardless, my point is that mortality in the developed world is relatively rare in childhood, whereas in Africa it's obviously common. But let me repeat what I said about Peter Abe's work. It's not that I discard it or think that his conclusions are wrong. What I'm saying is that They are observational data, and they have to be confirmed by studies of the immune responses, and those have been done only to a certain degree.
When you say studies of immune response, what do you mean?
I mean whether the immunity of the child is interfered with by DTP, that is, immunity to other diseases. And as I mentioned before, he has shown that measles vaccine has a positive effect, and that has been confirmed by showing that measles vaccination influences immunity to other diseases.
So
There you go. So he's not an anti-vaxxer, this person that did the study.
what you're saying is that you don't dispute his findings that at least in this African country,
Yes.
there is a 10 times greater death rate amongst those who got DPTP in the first 6 months of life versus those who got no vaccines, correct?
I don't dispute his findings. I would have to look further to make sure that the populations that were studied were absolutely equal in other respects.
Okay.
But again, I'm not one who discards Peter's studies a priori.
Okay, and at that point, I think that is where we're going to leave it. I'll make a note of the time, which is where we'll kick off again next Sunday, which will be part 8 of Stanley Plotkins being questioned on, because he's testifying that vaccines are safe to take, because he makes a load of them. We'll be back soon. Okay, thanks at the very least to Rosie for taking the time to comment in the chat this evening. Thanks, of course, to anyone else who has watched along, whether you're watching it live with us tonight or in after the fact. Yeah, make sure if you want to see previous parts of this watch along, you check the links in the description. I would like to thank you. Hang on, let's make myself a bit more visible. Yeah, I want to thank you for being with us this evening. I will, if I'm not back before, be back again Thursday evening for another the second sign live stream. Hope you can make it along to that. Thanks for being with us. If you want to show your appreciation for tonight's live stream, then yeah, feel free to hit the thumbs up button before you leave this evening. And there are other ways of showing your appreciation. There's a few names on the screen right now who I give a thanks to every week just for going beyond hitting the like button and whatnot. Thanks to them. And if you're watching on Rumble, there are links in the description to where you can find other platforms where my work exists. Okay, we'll be back we'll be back Thursday with non-Stanley Plotkins related info, but whilst we are going through this deposition, we've got another 2 hours and 18 minutes to sit through. So we've got at least 3 more parts. So maybe we'll do them in 2. We'll see how we get on. But yeah, this is where we're going to have to draw things to a close. Okay, thanks ever so much for being with us. Thanks to Rosie. Thanks to you also for tuning in. Okay, see you in the next one. Hope you all have a good week. I'm going to try and get back before Sunday, but before Thursday, but no guarantee. We'll see how we get on. Okay, just to keep up to date, big news tonight, Joe Biden's not going to be president after, who cares? I'm not into that sort of stuff. I'm not a newsreader or news announcer. I'll leave that to the pros, the professional paid liars. Okay, take care. Time to say over and out. Good night.
Have you ever used orphans to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.